Alright, what is up my homies? Welcome to Brain Melt University. We left off with risk management and mitigation tactics, but now that we've done that, now we need to really start sinking our teeth into what cybersecurity deals with on a daily basis. The term hacker is something that has completely permeated pop culture, but most people really are unable to define what a hacker is and are completely unaware that there are several different brands or flavors of hackers. In essence, a hacker is an individual that takes an object and uses it in a way other than what it was originally intended to do. A great example of hacking is what birthed American football. The story goes that a soccer player was getting fed up with the fact that their team wasn't able to score, so he simply picked up a soccer ball and started running with it. The response was so positive that we began playing football differently from the rest of the world, which is why when we play what the rest of the world calls football, we have to specify that that is soccer, and when Americans play football, it means that Tom Brady's going to win another Super Bowl and everyone's going to find a reason to call him a cheater. Let's get back on topic. With computer hackers, it's the same thing. We design computers to perform a certain function, but a lot of times you can actually convert a computer to operate in a way other than as intended, such as with cryptocurrency, where individuals discovered that video cards, something normally designed to display beautiful images on your computer screen, was actually really good at conducting the mathematical calculations necessary to facilitate a cryptocurrency transaction. And because of all these Bitcoin miners who are out there now using hundreds or even thousands or tens of thousands of graphics cards to mine cryptocurrency, that's why I haven't been able to get a current generation graphics card for the past 5 years. When we're talking about computer hackers, they typically come in 3 flavors. Your first is a black hat hacker. This is what everyone automatically thinks about when they think about a hacker. This is the individual that's for some reason wearing a hoodie and sunglasses indoor in a dark room while trying to break into a computer system. Now, black hat hackers often do not look anything like this, and they're usually just someone who is trying to make a profit or trying to send a political message through breaking into computer systems. Then you have white hat hackers. White hat hackers are the complete opposite of a black hat hacker. White hat hackers have all of the exact same skills as black hats. The difference is that white hat hackers are doing everything completely legally. They are being paid by organizations to break into computer systems so that they could turn around and explain exactly how they did it so that that organization's security team can patch those holes before someone actually uses it to cause harm to that institution. This activity is also referred to as penetration testing. Where the waters start to get murky is when we start dealing with gray hat hackers. Gray hats are individuals who do not do things with malicious intent, but usually they're not following the bounds of the law as they're doing it. A great example that I ran into a few years ago, a couple of gray hat hackers were getting fed up with the number of devices that the Internet of Trash was allowing to add to botnets, especially the Mirai botnet, which was very huge at the time. One of these gray hat hackers, in my personal opinion, I sympathize with them and I kind of agree with what they did. These organizations and companies that are building these Internet of Trash devices with virtually no built-in security were becoming infected with worms and added to botnets, and they weren't patching their own devices to make them more secure. So a gray hat hacker actually wrote a piece of what is essentially malware, but this malware would infect these devices, and instead of actually adding them to a botnet, it would actually make security upgrades to all of these devices that were infected. Now, what he did was illegal because he was writing malware and he was doing all of this without the manufacturer's or the customer's permission. Now, the other gray hat hacker does not have my sympathy, and I do not agree with what they did. They decided that if the companies were not going to make sure that their devices couldn't be added to a botnet, he was simply going to make sure that they could never be added to a botnet again. And he wrote what is basically Brickware. Brickware is a piece of malicious software that is designed to completely destroy a device and render it completely unusable. So whereas one of these hackers was upgrading the security of individuals' devices with no pay, I might remind you, and the other one was just completely destroying these devices so they could not be added to botnets in the first place. You have two people, two very very different ways of operating, and yet both of these are gray hats. They were operating illegally, but neither of these were doing this with necessarily malicious intent, and rather were doing so with the best of intentions. That is a gray hat hacker. The problem with all of these hackers is they have to be better than the competition in order to be good at their job. If you're a white hat hacker and you don't have the skill set to properly defend a network by trying to break into it and find all of the attack avenues, then you're not going to be a white hat hacker for long. You have to keep one step ahead of the bad guys. Likewise, if you're a black hat hacker, you have to be better than the white hats who are defending these individual networks. If you're a gray hat, it's the same thing. You need to be better than whoever you're attempting to send a message to. But here's the real sadness when it comes to network security. You can have the most secure network on the planet, and it can be completely undone by one employee in your organization making a really stupid decision. This is why the majority of hacks and high-profile data breaches aren't actually being influenced and facilitated by a poorly designed network, but rather by an employee in an organization who is not following security policy and actually lets an individual through. This is normally being accomplished through the use of social engineering. Whereas computer hackers generally rely on vulnerabilities in computer systems in order to exploit them, a social engineer relies on the vulnerabilities in human behavior in order to exploit human behavior. A social engineer, on the other hand, relies on the vulnerabilities in human interaction in order to exploit and draw out certain behavior patterns that they can manipulate in individuals. The sad thing about most malware is it won't actually move from network to network as long as those networks are properly designed and secured. However, all it takes is one person clicking on the wrong link in an email, clicking yes, I want to download this possibly dangerous file when they're trying to do their job, or by picking up a free thumb drive they found in the parking lot and deciding that their work computer is the best place to plug that thing in at in order to figure out what's going on it. Social engineering attacks generally follow 4 key phases. The first key phase is research. This is where you're looking at the organization that you are attempting to attack, and you start to figure out what that organization looks like. You're starting to look at the higher ups, you're looking at the department heads, you're looking at anyone who you can find on that organizational chart, you're looking for the exact name of departments, you're looking for that company's logo, you're looking for examples of that organization's email signatures. All of this information is going to be necessary when you're performing a social engineering attack. I see these all the time with my organization, but the thing is that your research is only useful as long as it's up to date. Years after my organization changed CEOs, I was still receiving emails from my company's old CEO who's still acting like they're in charge, asking me to do something for them. But it was one of those things that was extremely easy to figure out that this was a scam because it was not the current CEO, it was someone who wasn't even with the organization anymore. They had the wrong signature. Each department in my organization has its own unique signature icon, and the CEO of the organization was using an email signature from a very specific division within that organization, and the CEO would never do that. So it's these simple things that can be the difference between a very poorly executed social engineering attack and a very, very convincing social engineering attack. If that same email had come from the current CEO and they had used the proper logo in the signature line, it would have been a lot more difficult for individuals who aren't properly trained to look out for these to spot that this was actually a scam. After the research phase, you have the building trust phase, and that's exactly what I just described with my last example. When you're building trust, you're creating a scenario. You're trying to create a situation where you can interact with individuals, where you can actually manipulate them. This is where if you're a company that has a badge system where you have to swipe your badge to get into the front door, this is where you say, well, maybe I can wear a set of coveralls and I can carry a couple heavy toolboxes, and if I show up at the door at the same time as someone else, I might be able to ask them to hold the door for me, and those people might think I'm just a construction worker who's there to do some repairs on the building. That's very easy to exploit, and we've been so ingrained with the desire to be polite and not be a complete and utter asshole to people that we feel sorry for someone who's trying to get through the door and we're telling them, nope, can't hold the door policy, it's slam the door shut behind us. Like, you don't have to do that. The simplest thing is, oh, let me hold one of your toolboxes while you swipe your badge. And that's where you start to figure out, oh, I don't have my badge, I left it in my van. And you should tell them, well, go get your badge, I'll hold your stuff. And if they deny that, odds are they don't belong in that building and you should call security. But coming up with the scenario itself, that is the building trust. That's where you're sitting there going, okay, I'm going to send an email and it says that I am the CEO of this organization or I am the department head. Maybe I'll just build a Facebook page that looks like this particular individual there, and I'm going to start sending friend requests to everyone who's suggested because Facebook already knows who all of that real person's actual friends are. And then you're going to start sending them this sob story that you're out of country and you're trapped and you don't have any money or something like that. This is all examples of building trust. You're coming up with a scenario where these people feel sorry for you and will want to help you. Another situation is coming up with a scenario where people just completely stop thinking because you've scared them so much. We've all got those phone calls in the middle of dinner that says that the guy works for Microsoft and your computer has a virus and that you need to let them in your computer. Well, here's the thing. If they've been able to detect that your computer has a virus, they would also have the ability to just log in and fix it. All they would need is your permission, not for you to actually be able to break in and take control of their computer. Anyone with a logical brain can see the flaw in the logic on any of these types of attacks. But the problem is that there is a portion of your brain that doesn't understand logic. It is purely concerned with self-preservation. And this portion of your brain is the amygdala. When individuals move to the exploitation phase of social engineering, they are drawing upon your amygdala, the part of your brain that is going to do whatever it needs to survive and ensure the survival of the herd. If an individual is not thinking properly and logically to think about, well, that person with coveralls, I've never seen them before and this is only a company of 20 or 30 people, you probably should ask what they're doing there. But at the end of the day, the very attractive woman carrying 5 boxes of donuts is going to be much more difficult to say no to than the creepy guy in a hoodie asking if you can just let them in the building. Like, it's not going to work that way. Your amygdala is not going to be able to think because it's designed to keep you alive. It's the thing that keeps you from stepping on a rattlesnake by freezing your entire body as soon as you start hearing a hissing sound. Or it's the part of your brain that starts making you go into a cold flop sweat and makes your heart beat 120 minutes per second, and makes your heart start beating 150 beats per second the second your teacher brings up pop quiz. This is the vulnerability in the most complex computing device on the planet, which is the human brain. And this is what is being exploited in social engineering attacks. Now, a successful exploitation is one thing. You can get someone to let you in a building, or you can get someone to click on a link in an email and download malware. But you need an exit strategy. You need to find some way of getting back out before anyone realizes that there's been an attack. The difference between a good social engineering attack and a great one is the good ones get caught, the great ones are over before anyone even realizes that there's an attack underway. A good exit strategy is just as important as a good building trust strategy. You know that if you are able to gain access to a controlled building in order to get physical access to their network, you're going to need a way back out. And so if there's a badge out system, just like there is a badge in system, you are screwed the second you get through the door because now you can't get back out. And people are really going to question when you're asking people to let you out of the building when you don't have a badge. Getting into the building, it's easy for people to assume you have a badge, your hands are just full, but when you're leaving, it's not quite as simple as just, oh, I'm just going to let this person out. So you need to have a proper exit strategy with any social engineering attack. Now let's talk about the different types of social engineering attacks. Now, the big one that we talk about is phishing and the various different forms of phishing. Phishing is a form of social engineering attack where it's generally being delivered through email. The example that I brought up earlier with the old CEO telling me that they need to have a very important meeting right now is an example example of a social engineering phishing attack. However, there are many different forms of phishing attack. You can have a vishing attack. Vishing is a form of phishing that is delivered through telephone conversations. This is the people calling you up and saying they work for Microsoft. These are the people calling up and saying there's an issue with your car's extended warranty. Or these are the people saying they come from card member services and there's an issue with your credit card. These are all social engineering vishing attacks. Smishing attacks are phishing that is delivered through text message, through SMS. Smishing attacks are not as common. I've actually fallen prey to one of these in the past. It was not extremely obvious what was actually going on. It was basically just a racket to draw up charges for what's basically a text dirty number, when those were a thing, I guess. I don't get it. But someone was texting me, I kept telling them to leave me the F alone, and eventually after like an hour of me telling them to screw off, I got a text that said, if you want to continue paying for this service, please text yes. And I was just like, what? And then I got my cell phone bill. Oh. More often than not, smishing attacks aren't used for that particular service anymore. Usually they follow the same guidelines as a vishing or phishing attack. These are usually impersonating someone you know, and they're usually trying to get you to perform a certain function like, oh, hey, have you checked this particular email yet? Or something like that. Smishing is not common, but it is a very big deal. Now, after phishing, we also have spearfishing. A phishing attack is pretty broad spectrum, and it can be used for any number of things. It can be used as a reconnaissance tool in and of itself for conducting research. If you can get 40 people from an organization to respond to an email, you can actually collect quite a bit of information from them without attempting to use some unknown person at a company as a delivery vector for whatever attack you're planning. Whereas a phishing attack just kind of casts out a wide net and it tries to catch anyone. A spearfishing attack is after a very specific group of individuals or a very specific individual. This could be targeting people from a specific area of your organization, like the research and development department or the financing department. These spearfishing attacks often end up escalating into what's called a whaling attack. Whaling attacks are attacks that focus on high net worth individuals or individuals who have a high stake in an organization's governance. These are the ones where they're targeting C positions, chief financial officer, chief technology officer. That's kind of a stupid person to target at an organization, but they do. Or chief executive officer, CEO. These are whaling attacks. They're after the big dogs. They're after the people who have the most money or the most ability to have access to the entire organization. Now, moving away from phishing and its different varieties, you can also have a baiting attack. Now, I've already touched on one form of baiting attack. A baiting attack, such as a USB drive laying in a parking lot, and that particular USB drive is packed full of malware. Or think about all of the memes out there about LimeWire and Kazaa and all of those early to mid 2000s software designed for pirating music, and so many of those files were packed full of malware. I learned pretty quickly you're not going to find a song that's smaller than 1 megabit in size, but you're going to find a lot of malware that's only 32 kilobits in size. Apparently this was something that nobody else ever caught on. Also, when the file extension is not MP3, then it's not music. Now, baiting attacks often utilize something called a Trojan horse, which we'll get into when we discuss malware, and your baiting attacks can also just be an infected file, a file that does a very specific thing, but it's also performing malicious stuff in the background. There's also the quid pro quo. I hate saying that. There's also the quid pro quo attack. The quid pro quo is a you scratch my back, I scratch yours. If you give me something, I'll give you this super cool tool that you definitely can't find for free somewhere else on the internet. You see these all the time with like the free gift box services, where if you give us basically every piece of personal information we could possibly ever need about you, we'll give you a free sample of shampoo. Another example is one that I've talked about several times so far already in this video, and that is the tailgating attack. That's where you're trying to gain access to a physical location that is controlled, and you try and scoot in behind someone who has access before the door actually locks behind them. Or you get them to hold the door open because you've got your hands full. These are all examples of tailgating attacks. Now, all of these are forms of social engineering, and all of these are ways that our own security practices can be circumvented in order for attackers to directly attack our network from inside out rather than from the outside in. Now, attacks normally take one of two forms: the attack that's designed to collect data and the attack that's designed to prevent you from providing services to your customer base. These attacks that are designed to prevent your customers from utilizing your services or prevent your employees from utilizing their own resources is called a denial of service attack. Denial of service attacks take several different forms. The two major ones are a simple denial of service attack, which is a single computer system attacking a single network or a single computer system on its own. These are pretty difficult to maintain with modern computing resources, and enough devices have built-in safeguards against these denial of service attacks that they are capable of just completely avoiding and ignoring them for the most part. This is why a distributed denial of service is much more dangerous. A distributed denial of service is where multiple devices are all attacking a single area of the internet at the exact same time. The botnets that I explained about earlier when I was talking about gray hat hackers were designed to be used in DDoS attacks. Distributed denial of service attacks can utilize botnets that include hundreds of thousands or even millions of individual devices all attacking a specific organization or server at the exact same time. With that much traffic all attacking the same device at the same time, that device is not going to be able to keep up, and the result is it just dies. It says, I'm not doing this anymore, you need to fix this, and once everyone's not trying to talk at once, then I'll go back to doing my regular job. You can also have what's called an amplified DOS attack, which is where an attack keeps getting larger and larger over time, such as one device attacks two devices and those two devices will attack two more, and eventually all of those devices will attack one host. So that particular form of attack is an amplified attack, and that follows a very similar line to a reflected DOS attack. A reflected DOS is where you're reflecting your attack off another device, so rather than you being the one who's blacklisted as a attacker, that other device who's actually performing the attack, because it doesn't actually know what it's being asked to do, it's just complying with your request, it's the one that gets blacklisted, and you might end up blacklisting someone that you actually want to be able to do business with, which is a double whammy. If you combine a reflected DOS with a DDoS, you can have multiple devices all reflecting their attack off of multiple other devices, and so your botnet might not even be correctly identified, and all of these other devices you're sending requests to are just going to be complying because they're trusting, I guess. This topic gets a lot bigger, and we haven't even started talking about malware yet, so I'm going to make this video part 1 of a 2-part series, and next week we will post up part 2 and continue to discuss different forms of attacks that can be used either for denial of service, and then we'll move into different forms of malware and other miscellaneous cybersecurity related topics. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and I will see you all here next time at Brainmelt University. As always, please feel free to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share with your friends. All of these things help the YouTube algorithm recommend us to more viewers and help us be a better resource to you in the future. Stay safe, y'all.